There's something sacred about golden hour on the countryside. The sunlight poured over my land in wide, syrupy streaks, glistening on the blades of wild grass, warming the creaky wooden boards of my porch and casting long, gentle shadows beneath the oak trees I'd planted with my father. The air smelled of pine, earth, and the faint smoky echo of last night's bonfire. I was 3 sips deep into my evening coffee, the ceramic mug warm in my hand, when I heard it. The sound hit like a punch, tires crunching gravel. Then another. Then another. One after the next. Too many. I lowered my mug and stood, squinting toward the main entrance. A white SUV came barreling down the old dirt path, kicking up a cloud of dust thick enough to choke a horse. It wasn't alone. Behind it came a silver minivan, followed by a lifted black pickup with flags whipping from the back like they were rolling into battle. I counted for 5, 6 vehicles before I even stepped off my porch. At first, I assumed someone was lost. People occasionally mistook the entrance to my property for the state park trailhead a mile north. But this was different. These people weren't confused. They were organized. They weren't slowing down or stopping to ask for directions. They were parking, angling into the tall grass like they belonged here. The panic in my chest started as a flicker. I walked down the porch steps with deliberate calm, pretending I wasn't alarmed. But each step brought with it the undeniable truth. Someone had planned something here. On my land. The first car door flung open, and out came a woman with a commanding presence that made the others hesitate. She was large, mid-30s, obese, dressed in a gray sleeveless top and high-waisted denim shorts. Her short, wavy light brown hair bounced as she stomped across my yard like it was her own front lawn. In her hands, she carried a 3-tier red velvet cake, the white frosting already starting to melt in the heat. Beside her emerged a younger guy, tall, lean, maybe 20. Sleeveless summer shirt, cargo shorts, smug as hell. His sunglasses reflected the countryside like it was his empire. Nancy, I muttered under my breath. I'd seen her once before at a neighborhood meeting 3 years back. She wasn't from my side of the valley. She was from the HOA-controlled development 3 miles east. Different rules, different attitudes, different world. The kind where people believed property lines were just suggestions. She spotted me as I stepped onto the path, her face breaking into a forced smile that only made her audacity worse. "Oh, hey," she chirped like we were old pals. "Hope you don't mind. We just needed a little more space for my brother's birthday." I stared at her, my jaw clenched. "This is private land." I know, she said breezily, waving her hand like I'd just commented on the weather. "But remember last year? You said I should drop by sometime. Well, we figured today was perfect." I never said that. Not in person. Not by text. Not ever. She turned toward the boy, beside her. "This is John," she added proudly. "The birthday boy. Turning 20 today." He gave me a smug nod and reached into a cooler to grab a soda, cracking it open like he was already at home. More vehicles were arriving. Kids jumped out and immediately began sprinting toward the open grass, shrieking with joy. A pair of men started unloading a grill from a truck bed. Red checkered tablecloths fluttered in the wind as women covered picnic tables like this was a state fair. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I said, my voice low and sharp now. Nancy set the cake down on one of my benches without asking. "Look, it's just a small get-together. You've got acres here. What's a few friends enjoying the scenery?" She looked me up and down. "Don't be that guy, okay? A few friends?" There were already 30 people visible, and more cars pulling in. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "This is trespassing. I didn't give you permission." She rolled her eyes, then dropped the innocent act like a mask sliding off her face. "You've got more space than you know what to do with. You leave half of it untouched. And honestly, it's selfish. We're not hurting anything." I pointed toward the edge of the yard. "You already knocked down my no trespassing sign." "Maybe the wind knocked it," she said with a shrug. "Don't get worked up. Seriously, just relax. There's enough stress in the world. Grab a drink." John chimed in, taking a step closer. "Yeah, man, chill. It's not like we're building condos. It's one party. One of the kids kicked over my garden gnome. Another dumped a soda can into my bird bath. Nancy watched it happen and didn't even blink. I took a step back, chest tightening. I wasn't the kind of man who enjoyed confrontation. But this wasn't just disrespect, it was a hostile occupation. My land wasn't just property. It was history, sweat, memory. The only piece of my family's legacy I had left. Wrap this up in 5 minutes, I said, tone colder than ice. Everyone off my land. Nancy crossed her arms and tilted her head. Or what? You gonna call the cops over a birthday cake? John laughed behind her, tossing his soda can onto the grass. Seriously, you'll look like the real Karen if you do. That word, Karen. The way it got thrown around these days like a weapon to silence anyone standing up for themselves. He meant to make me the villain. And maybe that's when the shift happened. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I turned. Walked away. Back toward the house. Past the overturned gnome. Past the children chasing bubbles. Past the speakers now playing loud pop music that shook the barn walls. I climbed the porch steps, grabbed my phone off the table, and opened the camera. I began filming from my perch as the chaos spread across my field like an oil slick. Nancy stood at the center now, giving a toast beside the cake. To my baby brother, who deserves way better than that HOA park they call a picnic area. Laughter. Cheering. From where I stood, I saw the long line of parked cars now wrapping around the dirt road, some veering into ditches. I saw a kid urinate behind my tool shed. Someone started setting off firecrackers. They didn't just disrespect my land. They desecrated it. So I swiped open the phone app and pressed 911. A calm voice answered. 911, what's your emergency? I took a long breath. Yes, I'd like to report an illegal gathering. Roughly 90 people trespassing on private property. There's underage drinking. Vehicles blocking a public road. And the owner? That would be me. The dispatcher's tone sharpened immediately. Are you safe at the moment, sir? For now. I'm sitting on the porch, watching them tear up everything I've built. We have officers en route. Stay on the line. As I kept the call going, my camera captured Nancy laughing beside John, a slice of red velvet cake raised triumphantly like a trophy. She had no idea what was coming, and I wasn't going to lift a finger. I was going to sit right there and let the panic come to them. The minutes dragged like hours. I stayed on the porch, slouched into my weathered rocking chair, cradling my phone like a detonator. The dispatcher had advised me to remain where I was, not to confront anyone. I didn't need convincing. I wasn't about to get into a shouting match with people who thought barbed wire was just decoration. Below me, the unauthorized festival bloomed in full color. The air smelled of meat fat sizzling over coals, cheap perfume, and the acrid tang of lighter fluid. A grill popped loudly near the side of my barn, the metal legs teetering on uneven ground. The red velvet cake was now center stage on one of my picnic tables, my table, already half-eaten, smeared with fingerprints and flies. Nancy held court like she was queen of the valley. Her voice was impossible to ignore, loud and commanding, amplified by a portable speaker with a mic she'd brought. She raised her red solo cup to the crowd gathered in folding chairs and plastic tables. To John, she shouted. Because when the HOA says no loud parties and no outdoor fire pits, you find somewhere better. Cheers erupted. Fireworks popped in the distance, small but sharp, and a baby started crying somewhere near the old chicken coop I turned into a tool shed. A Bluetooth speaker launched into a dance remix, bass pounding hard enough to rattle my porch railing. John stood beside Nancy, holding a burger in one hand and a Bluetooth speaker in the other. He did a slow 360, recording his party with a smug grin plastered across his face. I feel like a king out here, he shouted. No rules. No neighbors. Just freedom. It was ironic. Every single one of these people came from neighborhoods full of rules. They didn't want to escape structure. They wanted to vandalize peace and walk away before the consequences landed. More guests arrived. A large black pickup truck pulled up onto the grass, its tires leaving deep grooves in the soil. The driver opened the tailgate and began handing out beer coolers, like door prizes. Nearby, two boys popped open a bottle of something sparkling, far too young for it, and poured it into small cups, as if they were at a wedding reception. That was the moment I saw a neighbor's car slow down near the road. An older man, Mr. Killian from the north lot, rolled down his window to ask someone to move a parked vehicle. The answer came from John himself. John flipped him off, then shouted, "Call the cops, Grandpa. It's a free country." The car drove off, but the wheels were already turning. I had a strong hunch that Mr. Killian was making a call of his own. I kept filming. I panned across the guests, zooming in on license plates, catching faces, capturing voices. Every bit of evidence stacking up like firewood. I caught sight of a group huddled behind my barn, vaping, passing around something in a paper towel. Another girl was throwing up behind the tractor I hadn't moved since last winter. Nancy walked toward the cake again, now smeared and collapsed on one side. She took the mic and said something about making memories, and how no one could kick them out now. A roar of laughter followed. I saw my hammock in the background, occupied by two teenagers who'd kicked off their shoes and were now scrolling on their phones like they were at a resort. One of them had cracked the frame. It sagged dangerously close to the ground. I swallowed hard. The sun dipped lower, the amber glow casting long shadows across my property. It was beautiful in the worst way, like watching a sunset through the smoke of your burning house. I couldn't believe this was happening. But worse, I couldn't believe how powerless they believed I was. Inside my pocket, the phone buzzed. A text from the sheriff's office. Units en route. ETA 12 minutes. Remain where you are. I turned the camera toward myself briefly, then back to the chaos. My voice, calm and deliberate, narrated quietly. This is what happens when entitlement meets audacity. When someone decides your land is theirs because they don't respect boundaries. Down below, Nancy had started line dancing with a group near the fire pit someone had dug without asking. Dry grass surrounded the whole area. It would take one stray ember for this whole place to go up. The thought made my hands clench around the armrests. Another car skidded into the field, this one nearly clipping a child's toy scooter someone had abandoned. The driver, clearly already buzzed, jumped out and tossed a cooler to a guy in a tank top. He yelled, "Party still going, right?" Nancy, now sweaty and flushed, raised her cup again. Cops don't care about a barbecue. They've got real crimes to worry about. And then came the siren. Short, sharp, icy. Heads turned. The music stopped mid-beat. A voice shouted, "Yo, what was that?" Another siren answered. Then the unmistakable flash of red and blue flickered across the edge of the tree line. Two sheriff vehicles emerged from the far road, followed by a third with its lights off but badge clearly visible. Then a fourth. They weren't playing. Someone screamed. And just like that, the entire mood shifted from festive to feral. Nancy's cup hit the ground. Her smile faltered, brow furrowed. She turned to John, who had already backed away from the picnic table and was pocketing his vape and phone. Did someone actually? The mic squealed and went dead. The crowd splintered like dry wood. People grabbed bags, chairs, coolers, anything that was theirs, and started moving toward their cars in a rush. Plates clattered to the ground. Someone knocked over the grill, and a small flame caught the edge of a paper plate stack before a panicked teen stomped it out. A mother screamed for her children. Two guys shoved each other while arguing over whose truck was blocking the other. One young woman tripped in her sandals and scraped her knee on the gravel. The chaos was like a busted beehive, loud and uncoordinated. Nancy stood still, alone now. Her red velvet cake had slid partly off the table and was face down in the grass. One of the deputies approached her. "Ma'am, do you own this property?" She opened her mouth, then shut it. The officer repeated, slower. "Ma'am, do you have permission to be here?" John stepped forward. "He said she could last year," he blurted. "He texted her to visit." I stood now, walking slowly toward them, phone still in hand, camera still rolling. I stopped a few yards away, met Nancy's eyes, and spoke directly to the deputy. "I own this land. I never gave them permission. I have video from the moment they arrived and documented damage. Nancy's expression twisted, part rage, part disbelief, part genuine fear. This is a misunderstanding, she snapped. It's a birthday. I thought we had, he said. The officer raised a hand to silence her. You've got nearly 100 people here, ma'am. Vehicles parked illegally, reports of underage drinking, and you've set up commercial-grade equipment on private land. We're going to need some answers. Now, one of the deputies began photographing the area. Another started taking down license plates. The sound of radios crackled in the background as a few guests were pulled aside for questioning. Behind me, more officers emerged from their cruisers, walking the perimeter. A deputy asked if I'd like to press charges. I didn't answer yet. Not out of mercy, but because I hadn't finished watching the collapse. Nancy turned to John. Do something. John stared at her, speechless. And then he ran. Literally sprinted toward the crowd trying to flee, disappearing between cars like a coward ducking out of the consequences. Nancy stood frozen, surrounded now by strangers she'd invited, none of whom wanted to stick around. I watched her eyes scan the field, trashed, stained, littered with plastic and wrappers and greasy smears of forgotten food. Her fantasy had crumbled. I finally broke the silence with one quiet sentence. I told you to leave. She turned her head slowly toward me, but didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The sirens kept flashing. The questions kept coming. And the party she thought no one could stop? It had become an investigation. And it wasn't over yet. The dust had barely settled when the aftermath began to bloom like a bruise. Nancy stood at the center of it all, arms crossed tight against her chest, as deputies moved around her with clipped professionalism. What was once a makeshift stage for celebration, a wooden picnic table draped in red checker cloth, now looked like a battlefield. The red velvet cake had melted into the grass, a smeared mess of cream and crumbs that drew ants in lazy, meandering lines. Overturned chairs scattered solo cups, half-eaten hot dogs still in their buns. Everything reeked of panic, waste, and entitlement. I kept my distance, filming every moment. The glow of twilight cast long shadows across the carnage, turning the whole scene into something out of a documentary on social collapse. More cars were being ticketed and towed, engines growling as tow trucks heaved them from ditches and makeshift parking spots along the county road. Nancy was arguing, but it no longer mattered. Her voice carried less weight now, shaky, desperate, lost. Whatever illusion of control she had conjured earlier had been shattered in full view of uniformed authority and a now fleeing audience. One of the deputies approached me as I leaned against the porch railing, arms folded. We'll need a full written statement from you, sir. Possibly sometime in court. I nodded, offering my phone. I've got videos. All of it, from the moment they arrived to when the panic started. He took it, reviewed a few clips, then gave a low whistle. You weren't exaggerating. Wasn't trying to. Just wanted my land respected. Looks like she's going to be facing some real charges, he added, nodding toward Nancy. Trespassing, illegal assembly, disturbing the peace. And that's before the county inspector gets a look at what they did to the land. My eyes followed his gesture. Where the crowd had danced earlier, the ground was torn up from cars and foot traffic. Ruts marred the soft earth, patches of grass were crushed into muddy divots, and remnants of charcoal and beer cans littered the area like confetti after a riot. Do I need to call environmental services? I asked quietly. Probably, he replied. Better to document everything now, before the rain washes it away. As the officers continued their sweep, Nancy's voice rose again, not in protest, but in plea. I didn't know he would care. It's just land. We were just celebrating. One of the younger deputies chuckled under his breath. Yeah, well, guess what? Land owners tend to care when you treat their property like a landfill. I walked back to the porch, grabbed a pen and a notepad, and began documenting every visible point of damage. Not for the police. Not for the social media circus. For me. Because someday down the line, when the grass regrew and the scars of this day faded into the soil, I wanted to remember the truth behind it all. The arrogance, the entitlement, and the fall. By the following morning, The internet had already exploded. The video I posted, barely edited, just a montage of footage from the porch with a caption that read, "She brought 90 people to party on my land. I brought a camera and the law," had gone viral. TikTok, Facebook, Reddit. It spread like wildfire. The comments rolled in by the thousands. Her face, when the sirens hit? Priceless. Why do Karens always think rules don't apply to them? Bro, you deserve a medal. Some eagle-eyed viewers recognized Nancy from HOA forums. Screenshots emerged, old arguments, her complaining about dogs barking or kids playing too loudly in her own neighborhood. The hypocrisy became digital gold. She was memed, mocked, and dissected like a fallen celebrity. One meme went viral within hours, a still frame of her standing beside the destroyed cake, mid-scream, with the caption, "This cake was made of entitlement and cream cheese frosting." By day 2, local news picked it up. By day 3, the county issued a public statement clarifying that unauthorized gatherings of that size on private land were not only illegal, but could also lead to civil liability for damages. Nancy's face was blurred, but those who knew her didn't need much help putting the pieces together. And then came the legal blow. I filed a formal civil complaint, armed with all my video evidence and statements from 2 neighbors, who'd also documented the illegal parking and underage drinking. The case moved faster than I expected. Maybe the publicity helped. Maybe the fact that one of the deputies' kids had gone viral for shouting, "I told you this wasn't a park," added fuel to the fire. At the courthouse, Nancy looked smaller. Not just physically, though she slouched in her chair as if trying to disappear, but mentally too, drained of the confidence she'd carried like armor just days before. The judge watched my footage in silence. When it ended, he removed his glasses, looked directly at her, and said, "Ms. Campbell, your complete disregard for another citizen's rights is astonishing. You treated someone else's property like a public venue, and worse, you brought minors, alcohol, and fire hazards onto it without permission." Nancy muttered something, maybe an apology, maybe an excuse. The judge didn't care. "You will pay restitution for the damages to the land, legal costs, and a civil fine for trespassing. If you had done this in a state with stricter property laws, you'd be in jail." Her final tally? $8,472.50. And not a penny short. John didn't show up to court. According to one neighbor, he transferred colleges mid-semester to avoid the local humiliation. His big birthday bash had become legend, for all the wrong reasons. Nancy, meanwhile, tried to disappear. She resigned from her HOA board quietly, sold her Facebook account, changed her number. Rumor had it she even tried starting over in a new town. But the internet has a long memory, and red velvet cake has a longer shelf life than pride. Back on my land, the scars took time to heal. The grass regrew slowly, but I replanted everything. New fencing, larger signs, a couple of motion-activated cameras near the entrance, just in case. My hammock stayed broken, but I left it that way, a reminder. I found something strange in the weeks that followed. Neighbors I barely knew started checking in, asking how I was. They brought coffee, offered to help reseed the field. Even Killian from the North Lot, who I always thought was just a grumpy old man, left a small note at my gate about damn time someone taught her a lesson. And in an odd way, I did feel vindicated. Not just because I won in court, but because I didn't let rage take over. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I let the camera roll. I let her fall. And fall she did. One afternoon, a couple of months later, I stood near the edge of my property, hammering in a new steel post for a sign twice as thick as the old one. It read, "Private land. Trespassers will be recorded and prosecuted. No exceptions." As I wiped sweat from my brow, I saw a familiar SUV slow down on the road. For a second, I thought it would pass. But it stopped. The driver's window rolled down. It was Nancy. She looked older now, paler, smaller. She didn't say a word at first. Then, with a voice barely audible over the breeze, she said, "I just came to say sorry." I didn't answer. I didn't smile. I didn't curse her either. I just turned back to the post, gave it one final strike with the hammer, and said without looking up, "Too late." The window rolled back up. The SUV drove off. I never saw it again. I stood there for a moment longer, listening to the wind rustling through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried, and the sun dipped low, casting a fresh golden glow over the healed land. There were no cars, no loud music, no stolen chairs or shattered gnomes. Just peace. The kind you defend not with fists, but with patience, proof, and the law. And the next time someone gets the bright idea to throw a party on my land, they better bring a permit and a lawyer.